The sun was a white coin in the sky, and the Mojave stretched around me like a sleeping giant. It was my third day alone in the desert, hiking through Joshua Tree National Park. I'd been craving silence, not the kind you get in a city park with headphones in, but real, soul-emptying silence, the kind where your thoughts get loud and the world grows still. My name is Mark, 32, divorced, software consultant. I had taken the trip to escape a life that felt like static buzzing, numbing, endless. The Mojave called to me like a dream. I wanted the stars. I wanted the solitude. I wanted something real. The landscape was biblical in its desolation. The ground was cracked and hard beneath my boots, the scrub low and thorny. Jagged rocks jutted out like ancient teeth, and those odd anthropomorphic Joshua trees stood motionless, twisted like old prophets in mid-curse. I hiked during daylight hours, careful to mark my path with a GPS tracker, and at night I camped in the designated sites, the nearest humans miles away. The first 2 days were uneventful, breathtaking even. I journaled, I read, I sat on warm rocks, watching the horizon melt into a pale pink bruise as the sun dipped behind the San Bernardino Mountains. That night, the third, I camped near a rock formation known as the Skull. It looked just like the name suggested. A massive boulder eroded into a shape unnervingly, like a human cranium. Kids loved to climb on it during the day. At night, it loomed. I set up camp 50 yards away, tucked between low shrubs and a squat boulder that helped block the wind. After eating a quick dinner of freeze-dried pasta and drinking half a canteen of lukewarm water, I crawled into my tent. That's when I first heard it, a low hum. So faint I thought it was the tinnitus I sometimes got after flying. But it didn't fade. It hovered, vibrating just at the edge of hearing. I pulled out my phone. No signal. No notifications. I opened the tent flap and stepped outside, half expecting a car or a generator. Nothing. The desert was silent. No wind. No insects. Just the sound, no, the sense of that hum, nestled in the back of my skull like a warning. It stopped as soon as I acknowledged it. That gave me more unease than if it had continued. The moon was almost full, casting hard shadows across the desert. The skull stood in silver light, its hollow sockets watching. I stared back. A cold sweat prickled my arms despite the dry heat. I laughed, told myself I was being stupid. Probably just blood pressure and nerves. I crawled back into the tent and tried to sleep. That night I dreamed of footsteps, soft ones, not boots, bare feet on gravel. When I woke, I was drenched in sweat. My watch read 3:14. The desert outside was unnaturally quiet. No breeze, no shifting sand, just that oppressive stillness. I sat up, throat dry, and unzipped the tent. The world outside was empty, but my skin crawled as if I'd been watched, was still being watched. I scanned the sand around my camp with my flashlight. Nothing, just the twisted shadows of the brush. Until I saw it. A single footprint. Bare, human, fresh. Only a few feet from my tent. It pointed away, as if someone had stood there watching me sleep, then vanished into the darkness. I stayed awake until the sun rose. Morning arrived too fast, and the heat with it. The light washed over the rocks in long, thin bands, the colors almost hallucinatory pinks that bled into gold. Shadows that seemed too deep for such a flat landscape. I stood staring at the footprint again, half hoping it had faded, half fearing it hadn't. But it was there. Still perfect. Toes, heel. The ball of the foot all, outlined clearly in the coarse sand. A right foot. Bare. Human. Slightly smaller than mine. And no others around it. Just one. No leading prints. No track to follow. Just that one, facing away from the tent, as though whoever, or whatever, had been standing there had simply stopped existing the moment they turned. I rubbed my eyes. Ate a cold protein bar with shaking hands. Maybe someone had wandered into my camp in the middle of the night. Maybe a desert wanderer, or a vagrant, but without shoes, without sound. I tried to brush it off, buried the footprint under a layer of gravel. But something lingered behind my ribs, an itch I couldn't scratch. I broke camp by 9 o'clock, packed everything tight, and decided to stick to the route I'd planned, south, along the boulder ridges toward Pinto Basin. The terrain got harder there, the scrub thinner, the sky wider. By 11 o'clock, sweat had soaked through my shirt. My canteen sloshed with every step, the weight of it a reminder of the absolute necessity of water out here. By noon, I began to hear something again. Not the hum, not yet. This was sharper, like a wire pulled taut and plucked. Once every few minutes, high and metallic, I'd stop, take out my earbuds, though I hadn't been listening to anything, and just wait. Nothing. And then, there it was again. I changed direction. Curiosity, maybe. Or something deeper. I left the trail, veering between stones and saguaros, my GPS pinging an angry red as I moved away from my route. I told myself it was just geology rocks cooling, echoing, the wind slipping through crevices. But that didn't explain why it seemed to be following me. That pluck. That faint, silver sound. I started walking faster. Eventually the ground began to dip and I found myself standing at the edge of what looked like an old wash-dry now, but maybe once a riverbed. The stones here were rounder, polished smooth by years of unseen current. My boots slid in the gravel as I descended. That's when I noticed the second anomaly. Something was growing here, not just scrub, but something more deliberate. At the base of the slope, nestled between two low rocks, stood a small bundle of what looked like lavender, tied neatly with a piece of red twine. Fresh, untouched, not native. I stared at it for a long time. Who the hell left lavender out here? I crouched, picked it up. The scent was unmistakable. Sweet, floral, a ghost of some far-off garden. I turned it in my hands and saw something etched into one of the stones beneath it. Symbols, or letters. 3 scratches, vertical, perfectly parallel. Then a fourth, diagonal, crossing them, like a tally mark. Or a warning. I stood up too fast. My head swam. The sun above felt hotter now, the air thicker. The distant mountains shimmered, no longer soft in the haze, but jagged, as if cut from darker stone. I told myself I was dehydrated, that I needed to get back on the trail. But when I looked up at my GPS, the screen was blank. No location, no signal, no map, just the words. Recalibrating. I swallowed hard. Turned in a full circle. Everything looked the same. Desert, rocks, blue sky. But the trail, the markers, the boulders I'd passed, the whole landscape felt wrong. Like the geometry had shifted when I wasn't watching. I walked back the way I came. Or thought I did. 30 minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. My shadow grew short and squat. I checked the compass on my watch. The needle spun slowly, like it was drunk, and then the hum returned. Worse this time, like it was inside my teeth, a vibration. Low, rhythmic, invasive. Not a sound anymore, but a feeling. The kind that rattles your bones before you even hear it. I dropped the lavender. That's when I saw it. Far ahead, just a speck on the ridge. A figure. Barely visible in the heat shimmer, standing still, facing me. I blinked. They were gone. The hum stopped, and the wind picked up again, like someone had just hit unpause. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, gripping the strap of my pack, pulse thudding in my neck like a drumbeat. The spot on the ridge where I'd seen the figure still shimmered, heat bending the air into ripples, but it was empty now. No sign of life. No shadows where there should have been one. Nothing to prove I hadn't imagined it, except the electric feeling still crawling under my skin. I turned, slow and deliberate, scanning the ridges, the wash, the edges of the rock faces. The wind blew a fine veil of dust across the stone, whispering through brush that only hours ago had seemed lifeless. And yet, there was movement. I swear there was. Not big, not overt, just peripheral. Like the desert had something inside it, watching through cracks and spines in the curves of baked rock. I checked the GPS again, still recalibrating. I tapped it, cursed, and slid it back into the side pouch. The sun was nearing its apex now, and I needed shelter, not just from the heat, but from whatever invisible thing was gnawing at the corners of my nerves. I spotted a shallow overhang carved into the side of a bluff maybe 30 feet away. Nothing substantial, but enough to get me out of the sun for a moment. I moved quickly, crouched beneath it, unstrapped my pack, and drank 2 long pulls of water. My throat was raw. My lips stung. I wiped sweat from my brow and tried to get my bearings. Then I heard the voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even distinct. Just a single word whispered so softly that it barely carried over the dry rustle of the wind. Mark. My name. I froze. My breath hitched. It came from behind me. I spun around. No one there. The desert lay open and blank, a canvas of dust and stone, utterly devoid of life. The wind picked up again, brushing past me like the hand of something tall and indifferent. The hairs on my arms stood up. I pressed myself deeper into the shade. I hadn't told anyone I was going this far in. My ex didn't care. My parents were dead. I'd filed the trip with the park, sure, and left an itinerary on my desk, but the idea of someone knowing my name out here, chilled me in a way I couldn't explain. I pulled out my phone again. Still no signal. I opened the compass app. The arrow spun twice, then pointed due west. That was wrong. I'd been heading south-southwest. I was sure of it. I pulled the GPS back out, and this time the screen was different. No recalibrating, just a grid of empty space, the terrain not rendering properly. But there was a red dot on it. A pulsing one, and it was moving. Toward me. No roads, no trails, no context, just that dot. Coming closer, I packed everything in a blur of shaking hands and left the overhang. I didn't know where I was going anymore. The landmarks were wrong. Every ridge looked like the last. The Joshua trees seemed to have rearranged themselves, though I knew that was impossible. But I walked, fast, then jogged. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I was truly, viscerally afraid of being seen. I passed a twisted metal sign, so rusted that whatever had once been painted on it had long since vanished. It jutted out of the ground like a relic from another time. It didn't look like anything I'd seen in the park before. It wasn't listed on the map, nor did it resemble any trail marker. It pointed vaguely downhill, toward a narrow wash flanked by strange stones. I hesitated, then followed. The wash descended gradually into a slot canyon, narrow and winding, the air suddenly cooler in the shade. My boots crunched on gravel, each step echoing between the stone walls. The place felt ancient, like it hadn't seen a human in decades. Then I noticed the carvings. At first, they were faint, just scratches in the rock, like old graffiti. But the deeper I went, the more intricate they became. Symbols, spirals, handprints, etched in something dark, red-brown, like dried blood. Some were tiny, childlike. Others were large, too large. And there, along one curve of the canyon wall, was my name, etched in smooth, deliberate lines. Mark. My breath left me. I reached out to touch it, and the stone was warm. Not sun-warm, body-warm. As if the name had just been carved. My fingers trembled. Then I heard it again. The voice, closer this time. Mark. Not whispered, not casual, said like a command. I turned and ran. The walls blurred beside me, symbols racing past. The hum returned, louder than before, now a deep, vibrating chord that thrummed in my bones. Like the whole canyon had become a tuning fork for something bigger. I emerged into sunlight, panting, nearly collapsing onto the open rock. The desert was still. The wind was gone again. So was the path. I looked behind me. The canyon entrance had vanished, just solid wall. I was somewhere else now, and the red dot on the GPS, it had stopped. Right on top of me, I staggered forward, sweat burning my eyes, the desert around me rippling with an intensity that felt personal. The sun was overhead now, unrelenting. My breath came in ragged pulls, each one scraping my lungs like dry paper. There was no trail, no canyon behind me, no markers. Just rock and dust and a dead stillness that made even my footsteps sound unnatural. I checked the GPS again. Still blank. The red dot was gone now, as if it had finished what it came to do. My throat was raw. I tried to focus, to orient myself using the sun, but even that felt untrustworthy. The sky was too vast, the colors too saturated, too perfect, like I'd stepped into a painting of the Mojave rather than the real place. I pushed onward. The only direction left was forward. Hours seemed to pass, or maybe none at all. Time was bending now, like heat waves off pavement. Eventually, I crested a small ridge and saw, down below, something impossible. A house. A single, dilapidated structure nestled in a shallow basin. Old wood. Tin roof half collapsed. The desert had tried to swallow it. Sand banked against the sides, brush grown up through the porch slats. No roads led to it. No power lines. No path. It was just there. I approached cautiously, legs trembling. My body begged me to stop, but curiosity pulled harder than fear. There were no sounds, not even birds, not even wind. The house's front door hung slightly ajar. I stepped onto the porch. It groaned under my weight. I could smell the dry rot, the stale wood, and something else. A coppery tang, metallic, wrong. Inside, it was dim. Sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, casting patterns across the dusty floor. A few broken chairs, a table covered in desiccated moths. No signs of recent life, except for the piano. It sat in the far corner, keys yellowed, lid warped by heat and time. It shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't have sounded. But as I stepped inside, a note played, clear, sharp, a single key. My heart stuttered. I stopped walking. Another note rang out. This time, not from the piano, from beneath the floor. I backed away, slowly. But the boards creaked underfoot, and I realized something chilling. They weren't just creaking from my weight. They were moving rhythmically, like something underneath was shifting. Breathing. The hum returned. It was strongest here. I turned to leave, then froze. The door was closed. I hadn't touched it. I ran to it, yanked hard. It didn't budge. Something was holding it from the other side. Or maybe from the inside. I slammed my shoulder into it once, twice, nothing. Then the boards beneath me shifted, and a hatch opened. A square in the floor, no wider than a crawl space, yawning like a mouth. A ladder led down into the darkness, the air spilling from it cold and damp and alive. I should have stayed up there. I should have waited, screamed, broken a window, anything but what I did next. I descended. Each rung was slick, not with water, but with something tacky, like congealed sap. My fingers stuck to the metal as I climbed, breath echoing off the stone walls of the shaft. At the bottom, I found a corridor. It wasn't natural. The walls were carved into the rock, smoothed with unnatural precision. Symbols covered them, some familiar, some not. Spiral upon spiral, crossed lines, interlocking eyes. At intervals, small bones were embedded into the walls, arranged in patterns too specific to be random. I was deep underground. The air was still, and every breath felt borrowed. Then I saw the mirror. A full-length glass standing perfectly upright at the end of the corridor. No dust. No cracks. Pristine. It shouldn't have been able to reflect anything in that darkness. And yet, it showed me not how I was, but how I had been. Back before the trip. Back before the divorce. Clean-shaven. Glasses. A blue hoodie I hadn't worn in years. My eyes in the mirror were not afraid. I reached out to touch it, and it rippled, not like glass, like water. And behind my reflection, something stepped into frame. Tall, thin, too tall. Its limbs too long, head tilted slightly, impossibly smooth skin that shimmered like oil. No eyes, just holes where they should be. Its mouth, if it had one, never moved. But in my head, I heard it, not words, not thoughts, just presence. The raw, overwhelming fact of it. It had always been here, watching. waiting, and now it knew my name. I stumbled back, turned, and ran. The corridor stretched longer than it had before. The ladder seemed farther. The walls began to pulse, those symbols glowing dimly with a sickly light, like veins under skin. When I finally reached the top, the hatch had closed. I slammed into it again and again until, without warning, it gave way, and I tumbled out into the desert. But the house was gone. No ruins, no porch, no signs of wood or tin. Just sand. And rock, and above me, the sun had moved. Too far. It had been near noon when I entered. Now it was dusk. The day had vanished, and in the distance, I heard the piano. One last time. I didn't remember walking, I just knew I was moving. My legs took over mechanical, desperate, pushing me over ridges, around boulders, through heat that had lost its sting. My body was a hollow vehicle now, pulled forward by something between fear and instinct. The sun was low. The Mojave burned in oranges and sick pinks, shadows bleeding long and sharp across the ground. I was miles from my route, miles from any marked trail. My water was gone. The world had shifted again, but this time I didn't even try to recalibrate. What was the point? My name had been carved into stone, whispered by the air, reflected not as I was, but as I had been. And there was something still out there that had known me long before I ever entered this desert. And it was still watching. When I crested the next hill, I saw movement, a figure, human, walking the ridge opposite mine, far but visible. I dropped low instinctively, squinted. They moved strangely, not limping, not stumbling, just wrong. Like every motion was borrowed from memory, familiar gestures applied to a foreign shape. I ducked behind a rock, heart clawing at my ribs. Peeked again. Gone, of course. The wind shifted and brought the scent of something burning. Not firewood, not brush, something more acrid, synthetic, like heated plastic or melted rubber. I followed it. I don't know why. Curiosity? Madness? Maybe part of me still hoped for another human, an explanation, a ranger, a sign. But what I found wasn't a person. It was a tent. Old. Collapsed. The fabric sun-bleached and half-buried in sand. A rusted camping stove lay beside it, cold. A sleeping bag, zipped up. I stepped closer. The bag was full. My breath caught. I unzipped it slowly, each tooth of the zipper shrieking in the silence. Inside was a man, or what had once been one, desiccated. Skin drawn tight over bone, lips shrunk back from yellow teeth. His eyes were open, but empty glassy marbles that had seen too much. A camera lay across his chest, old school, analog, a roll of film poked from its side. His hands were clutched around a notebook. I pried it free. The writing was frantic. Block letters, scribbled margins. It knew my name. It's under the ground. Don't follow the humming. It doesn't sleep. It likes mirrors. One final line at the bottom. It learns. I stumbled backward, heart racing. Dropped the notebook. The sun touched the edge of the mountains, bleeding its last into the desert. Everything around me was suddenly very quiet. And then footsteps. Behind me. Bare. Soft. Sand crunching. I turned nothing, but the sky was wrong again. Stars. Already. Too fast. Too many. They shimmered faintly, like reflections on a surface of black water, and in the spaces between, where the stars did not shine, I saw movement, like something too large, too distant, turning to look down. I ran. No destination. No plan. Just ran. Past the corpse. Past the dead tent, into the darkening desert. Time became slippery. I remember the moon rising, then setting, then rising again. At some point, I found a road, asphalt beneath my boots. I didn't question it, I followed it, and eventually, headlights. A truck. A man. He stopped, asked if I was okay. I must have looked wild, sunburnt, bleeding from somewhere. He drove me to a ranger station. and I vomited on the steps before I could even speak. They asked questions. I gave answers that didn't add up. I didn't tell them everything, just that I got lost. Disoriented. That I found. A campsite. Maybe a hiker who died of exposure. They searched. Found nothing. No body. No tent. No house. No carved names. No hatch. The park rangers were kind. One of them gave me water, sat with me while the sun rose over the edge of the desert again. He said it happens sometimes. People lose their way. Heat does strange things to the mind. I nodded, but I didn't agree because I know what I heard. What I saw, what knows me now. It's been 6 months. I'm home. Alive, mostly. But things aren't right. The hum returned last night, low, just behind the walls. And this morning, in the condensation on my bathroom mirror, someone had written my name. Not with a finger, with something sharper, something learning, something that remembers.